So if we would just bow our heads for a moment of silence before we start. Amen. Can't adopt the agenda until Jane gets here, and when Jane gets here, we'll adopt the agenda. But I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to any public comments that anybody wants to make, or any questions that they have of the commissioners that I've got. Kent Otto is at the beach with his family. Mason Blake is in Florence, Italy, looking for his luggage. They lost his luggage, so he's running around whatever he wore over there, he and his wife. So I'm going to open the floor for comments, so y'all can start talking. Jane will join us in a minute. Anybody?
Well, if we go, do we go in some kind of minutes? Do we go in some kind of minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, good enough. I'm Jean Norris. I live at 192 Mississippi Road. As a matter of possible public interest, Brad and I have recently started looking into whether it makes any sense to put solar panels on our house. We have one of the few roofs that's actually visible by satellite in Montreat. And the answer from two companies is, yeah, probably not, for what it's worth. I mean, that might affect a lot of other people too. But the issue that I really want to bring to the attention of the council is my growing conviction that we really need to have sewer extended to the ETJ. And I'm not saying, as others have said, let's the town build it. No. There's a county process for that, I understand. Well, I don't understand the process, but I understand there is a process. But my concern after looking at the recent construction up there is that you have to clear cut an entire lot to put in a septic field. And then you have to leave it clear cut because otherwise the tree roots will go back in and destroy your septic field. So that is a huge amount on the ridge line of potential ground that will be bare, subject to erosion, subject to rainfall runoff. I think it's an ecological disaster for us to let that happen, both because the water will not be recharging the springs and the creeks and the wells, but also because it's going to be excessive stormwater runoff. And third, it is fairly likely to be contaminated from those septic fields over time. So that's my pitch. And you're probably going to be hearing more from me about that because I intend to find out more about what's actually involved. Thanks.
Well, when you do, please bring it back to us. The last time we looked at putting sewer up there was probably 8 years ago, and the quote was about $250,000, which we did not have. Plus the fact that we have done this before in other areas, put in the sewer or the water, and then the property owners over a 10-year period pay the town back for it. Well, the property owners up there don't want it, and they're not going to pay the town back. They're not going to let us annex it. We can't annex it without being able to extend services, and we don't have the funds to extend services. So if you find out any other ways of doing it, please let us know.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? How you doing, Brad?
Brad Hester, by coincidence, also from 192 Mississippi Road. So in a way, I'm sort of following up what was just said, but in general, in my role with the tree board, I am increasingly interested in seeing more of a comprehensive and well thought through plan for how we deal with our environment here. We've been blessed with with natural surroundings that are really to be envied. And from the very beginning, there have been people who have been interested in the Montreat environment. But I think it's time to kick the can down the road and looking ahead at thinking about climate change, thinking about population change. I think it's really on us to be really seriously working out a plan for how we deal with the environment, how we preserve what needs to be preserved without, closing the gates and not letting anybody come up. So, excuse me. My recent awareness of this is again about the ETJ. My recent awareness about situation up there, up Graybeard, really raised some questions in my mind about the diligence of oversight that's happening, because I think the town does have a right to have an interest in what happens there, and also a responsibility to manage things. There are roads that go straight up the hill that don't have good management of water flow. There's work that's been going on that shows erosion already. And when the heavy rains happen, the streams that are called ephemeral are called intermittent, are raging torrents with a lot of sediment in it. That's the very top of the Flat Creek watershed. And I think we have a responsibility for the whole thing. And I don't have a solution. I have at times been concerned about how the people that are doing the looking at the permits, doing the zoning role, how much attention do they really pay to issues like that, or is it more of if it looks good on paper, then it gets an okay. I'm hoping that the new person in that role will take a more conscientious approach to looking at, particularly from the issues of the environment. So I could go on about that, but I really do think that current Montreat residents, people who are able, should be really paying a lot of attention to these issues.
Thank you, Brad. Anyone else? Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda now that we have a quorum. Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Thanks, Jay. We have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Whitmer, Mayor Pro Tem Whitmer has seconded it. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. Anyone else for public comment? Anyone? Questions? Whatever. Yes, Mr. Frisk.
If nobody's going to talk, that I will.
No, I just depend on you, Tom.
What, you really want to hear? Okay.
Yes.
But anyway, I just, every time I come here, I just want to express my appreciation to y'all, and especially for this bridge. I just love the new little bridge. And I've seen people, eating down there, and it's great. And we didn't have to spend a lot of money. I don't even know how much we spent, but I'm just grateful to y'all and to the staff, and even the garbage people are so friendly to me in the morning when I come out, and it's just a nice place to live. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Anyone else? No one jumping up? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn until 7 o'clock when our regular meeting starts. Have a motion from Commissioner Fouché. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Whitmer. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. We stand adjourned until 7 o'clock when our regular meeting starts.
I'm fine, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Well, we do.
Folks, I've got 7 o'clock. We'll stand and face the flag. Say the Pledge of Allegiance together. I've asked Tom Frisk to come up and tell a quick little story before we have a moment of silence. Tom, if you would.
I was just talking to the mayor about a simple story that, as we all know, that we've been privileged to have the Grahams live in our little town. And they knew everybody, internationally, presidents, famous, not famous. And one day we were having dinner with them on a Sunday evening and a hymn sing up at their house with their family. And Ruth had just come back and Billy from Britain, and they were good friends with Queen Elizabeth. And that's why I'm telling this story, because I want to honor her. And they said that, he's gone to their house, to the Queen's, the castle, about 5 or 6 times. But this time, the Queen invited them and she herself prepared their dinner. Anyway, that's the type of person she was, a wonderful Christian and a wonderful, humble.
Thank you, Tom. If everyone will bow their heads for a moment of silence before we start. Come in. Commissioners, you have seen the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? I have a motion from Commissioner Fouché. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second from Commissioner Alexander. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed. I want to introduce to everybody, Corrigan, stand up back there. Corrigan Monk is the new reporter for the Black Mountain newspaper, and she'll be frequenting our meetings, I'm sure. And if you get a chance, get to know her. Thanks, Corrigan. By adopting the minutes tonight, by adopting the agenda tonight, we approve the minutes of August 11th Town Council meeting and August 11th Public Forum meeting. Ben, do you have any communication tonight? Thank you, sir.
Meeting minutes.
Commissioners, you have received the administrative reports on finance, planning and zoning, police, public works, water, sanitation, and streets. Are there any comments and or questions on any of those?
Ben, I couldn't help but notice that the financial report for this month and year to date is red. And I assume that's because when we budget, we just take the overall income and divide it by 12. We don't look at it from when we expect it to come in.
Yeah.
And budget that way.
That's, and in essence, that's correct. And we wait on the monies. We're spending more money, and we're waiting on the tax receipts to come in from the shared revenues from the state of North Carolina, which usually come in around the 1st of September.
Okay, and I know you're hoping that you won't be here for the next budget, but you might want to just, and maybe we could pass it on too, that one thing we might want to do is budget income as we know historically when it comes in, so it doesn't look as scary.
Well,
as
it'll
those
always
numbers
look
look.
scary in July. Just for that reason, because your income hasn't come in.
But that's my point.
Yes, sir.
If we don't budget that large amount, but we budget on historical experience, then it won't look scary
I see
or
your-
as scary.
yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Hey, Richard. Any other questions or comments on any of those reports? Hearing none, floor is open for any kind of public comment. Anyone? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll move on. We have no old business tonight. We have several items of new business. Mary Roderick, you here? Mary Roderick from the Regional Planning with Land of Sky is going to talk to us about our wastewater, not wastewater, stormwater, right?
That's right.
Thank you.
And
Mary, the floor is yours.
so that I don't pace around, if you don't mind, is it okay if I just stay seated? Okay. I'm here to talk to you about your MS4 permit compliance. Last month, you did go ahead and adopt a resolution to have a compliant program. Thank you for doing that. We're on track to meet all of the requested documentation that they want in 120 days. And I'll go into more detail there. If you could go ahead and go to the next slide. Just for a reminder for those of you that aren't familiar with the MS4 permit and what that's for, permit for what? There's two components of this. The National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. This is something that was enabled through the Federal Clean Water Act, and it's for both wastewater and stormwater permits. And the second piece is MS4, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So that's your system of conveyance that collects all the stormwater and transports it to the nearest waterways. And in this case, the permits are to discharge stormwater to surface waters from your publicly owned utility, your publicly owned stormwater system. A lot of times we don't think of that as a utility, but it is. And, obviously you have a great crew that maintains your system well, but you also have this permit that has certain requirements. And I have those in black on the right. One of them is funding the stormwater program. And, that's just something you do through your property taxes. Implementing a comprehensive stormwater management plan. I'm going to talk a lot more about that. Documenting the program implementation. And that tends to be the hardest part, is documentation. As Barry said, they don't get their boots dirty much, do they? They think everybody runs around in the field with a clipboard and writing stuff down. And he's like, yeah, we're just fixing stuff. So documentation is important to DEQ anyway, and reporting annually, obtaining a new permit every 5 years. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now, is getting a new permit and implementing 6 minimum control measures. And I'm going to talk more about those. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the big picture is that enforcement has drastically increased. The EPA has come down hard on North Carolina, and North Carolina in turn is coming down much harder on its local jurisdictions, and really making sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed and all the paperwork's done. From what we've seen of your system, it is in good shape. It is well managed. You've got a crew out here that goes out ahead of rainfalls and makes sure it's clear. You've got good water quality. And the reality is you're doing okay with your stormwater. But DEQ, and that's where the notice of violation comes in. DEQ, has this like very long list of things that you're supposed to do. And it is a bit overkill, especially for a community this size, right? And you would not have these requirements if you were not within Asheville's urbanizing area. But that's what's pulled you into this, is because you are within the urbanizing area. If you were just out, like Brevard does not have an MS4 permit. Brevard, big community. They don't tip the scale. They're not at 10,000 people, which is the normal trigger, and they're not within an urbanizing area beyond their own. So Brevard has no permit. You do. There's a kind of crazy logic there, but it is what it is at this point. And because EPA has come down hard on North Carolina is coming down hard on the local jurisdictions, and they began pretty intensive audits in 2019, and most communities received a notice of violation. 24 out of 30 received a notice of violation that first year. And most communities are still receiving notices of violation. So that is not unusual or uncommon. Hendersonville did not. They have a stormwater administrator whose life is dedicated to stormwater. He wears t-shirts that say stormwater, and he had to follow up with them many times after his audit to get them to finish their paperwork and give him his notice of compliance. But he's pretty much the only program in our area that has been compliant out of the box. But it's a dedicated staff position. That's all he does every day, all day, and so that's that. That's Hendersonville. They're unique. So you're not quote unquote special in the sense that it's not unusual to get a notice of violation. They have updated their stormwater management plan requirements and their template, and that's a big part of what I'm working on is kind of putting everything into that structure, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Your audit was conducted in July, and then we got the notice, and the problem areas were in staffing and funding. And that's the thing that he lists for funding, is that you didn't do your permit renewal fee. Well, because you didn't do your permit renewal. And part of that was with staff changes. You had your administrator leave. You've had changes in the code administrator. It wasn't apparently very clearly communicated to, and that would be our staff, who's serving as your code administrator, that they are also the stormwater administrator. It says it in the ordinance. It is in there, but that wasn't part of the contractual discussions. So really, since David Curry left in 2017 or 2018, I guess, and our staff has taken that part-time role on, the aspects of the stormwater management plan have not been implemented that should have been. So I was not personally responsible for that, but I feel personally responsible for it. And I've called Erica. I'm like, Erica, are you sure you didn't realize that this was what our staff was supposed to be doing? And she's like, no, I didn't know. So now it's in the contract. And that's what DEQ wants to see. They want to see that responsibility in the contract. So our new contract has it in the contract explicitly, so that, that makes them happy. It makes DEQ happy. It makes our staff aware of what they're supposed to be doing. So I think I'll talk more about the things we've already resolved. You can go on to the next slide. Yes, sir.
You, in the problem areas, you addressed the funding issue. What about the staffing issue?
Well, so the staffing, right, really is just making it clear that the code administrator, who is our, Land of Sky employee, also needs to be doing the stormwater administration in the day-to-day, and also supported by me and our regional stormwater services program for kind of bigger picture items. She's here to do plan review and make sure the things get recorded on the deeds, make sure there's no O&M plan. Actually, go ahead and go to the next slide, because I think, well, I'm going to go into more of that detail in just a moment. Let me just back up for a minute and just talk about the stormwater management plan. Again, it's a prescribed template. There is and I'm going to show you an excerpt of it in a moment. But the last one was submitted in 2017. David Curry worked hard on that, and I imagine some of you were involved in those discussions. We have a new draft due at the end of October. It was actually due back in February. So that was news to me. It was news to everyone that the permit was expiring. Nobody had their eye on it, right? So the permit is technically expired, but we've done the work that we need to do to say, hey, we know this and we're working on it. So we're okay there. But the stormwater management plan just describes your stormwater system, your receiving waters, your pollutants of concern, and your target audiences. It designates responsible parties, identifies partnerships. So one of those is with Land of Sky, and that has to be contractual. And that wasn't, and that's one of the things he noted in the audit, is we didn't have a contract for those additional stormwater services, stormwater aspects and under the 6 minimum measures. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then it details what they call best management practices to implement these 6 minimum measures on the right in the black box over a 5-year period. So what are those? Public education and outreach, public involvement and participation. And there's a lot going on here, but it's just a matter of framing. So Land Care is doing great things, and they had a rain garden kind of information thing at the Arbor Day, native plant sale, Arbor Day Foundation celebration. We've done outreach as a part of the steep slope stormwater concept plan, but it's just DEQ said, yeah, you didn't have a contract for that. Like, you were doing some things and Land Care was doing some things, but it wasn't explicitly stated that they were fulfilling your permit requirements. I'm like, okay, but we were fulfilling the permit requirements. So some of it's semantics is what I'm saying. And it's just about us, like, just being very clear in our documentation, and that we're being very intentional about what we're doing. So public education and outreach, public involvement and participation, and they do separate those. One's more passive, one's more active. Illicit discharge detection and elimination. So that's dry weather flows. Is there anything coming out of the pipes when it's not supposed to be, when it's not raining? Construction site runoffs, that's actually runoff controls. That's actually delegated in your case to Buncombe County, and you do have a formal MOU with Buncombe County for that. Post-construction site runoff controls, that's, after the house has been developed, what do they have on site to control their stormwater? That's what that means. And then pollution prevention and good housekeeping for municipal operations, and that's largely under Public Works. So those are the 6 minimum measures that have to be implemented. Those are the things that have BMPs. If you'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Here's an excerpt. This is from the public involvement and participation. And at the top of the table, you'll see a permit reference, 3.31 public input. this is given from the state. You must have a mechanism for public input. Well, your town meetings are one of those mechanisms because you have a public comment period. You put this on your agenda regularly. You also have a stormwater web page. I do want to improve the web page a little bit. I want to provide a form for people to report issues through the website so they don't have to just make a phone call. I'm not one that will pick up a phone easily. I would rather like do it, at 10 o'clock at night in my pajamas on the couch via a form. So I'd like to add a form. So those are some of the things that, I see us being able to update. Each BMP, as they're called, has a description, a goal, a measurable goal, a schedule for implementation, and an annual reporting metric. And they're going to be using this format to check on your progress. Is coming out of this directly out of this table. If you'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So I really want to focus mostly on the compliance status. So to date, we do have a formal agreement with Land of Sky right now for compliance support. That's around like getting the stormwater management plan done. We also, like I said, did add to the contract, the second point, the zoning administration contract now has a modified scope of work to include the stormwater activities, focused specifically on development review. The MS4 inspection and IDDE app has been deployed. So I've worked with Barry. We already did an online stormwater system inventory that's all interactive. You can click on every outfall, every inlet, see a picture of it. That's public. I need to get, I think, a link of that also on your website. But we've had that up since 2020. So I'm glad we did that. I didn't realize we were doing MS4 work back then. When we were doing that, I was on a separate path basically. And so it is done. And then I've worked with Barry to integrate this app. And now he and his guys can go out in the field with their phones and they can do their inspections and they can do their IDDE inspections, and it's all saved in a database. So we've already done all that. We did that actually ahead of the audit, hoping to kind of get ahead of some of these things. Town staff, Barry and his staff have, one other person has been certified in the SCM, Stormwater Control Measure inspections, and he's already completed the inspections of the town-owned stormwater control measures. And one of those is your rain garden out back. That is a formal, it's on your site plan. It's supposed to be in the Register of Deeds and it's not, and it's also supposed to have an O&M plan and it doesn't. DEQ did not see that. They didn't review that. So those are minor things that we need to go ahead and make happen, just to be in line with your stormwater ordinance. There have been, since this has come to my attention that this is necessary, there has been one development application, I believe, or maybe two now, and both Scott and Kayla have gone through this process where they've gotten the things recorded with the Register of Deeds as they're supposed to, and they do have an O&M plan. But we need to backtrack and do the one for the town's rain garden. And I've had multiple meetings with Montreat Land Care about opportunities for public engagement or public education and outreach and public involvement and engagement. And we've brainstormed like what makes sense. It's just, I have to make sure to document it for Montreat, that it's documented. And I need to outline that, that's a formal partnership. I mean, Montreat Land Care is not equal to Town of Montreat. It's made up of multiple entities. But I think they can carry out some of the activities, at least the events that they're organizing are ways that, we can partner. So next steps are to finish the stormwater management plan draft by October 25th. In parentheses, I've added IDDE plan, MS4 O&M plan, operation and maintenance plan, and MS4 SCM O&M plan. Normally that has been, I've seen in other communities, they have had that as part of their permit year activities. Isaiah put that in your letter as we have to have all of them done. I did not push back on that. I really kind of read over it and then I read it again today. I was like, wait a minute, why is he making us do all of this? But I think Barry's got to start on it. We're gonna try. We're at least gonna have a draft of each of those as well, because your crew's out there doing the work. It's not that they're not doing the work. So I think it's just a matter of assigning a schedule, listing names, and hopefully that's it. after we submit the draft, we will then finalize it. So there's going to be some back and forth with DEQ. They're going to say, oh, change this, add this. I've been through this process with Fletcher already. Also in the process with Woodfin. I have a good idea of what trips you up, and now I know what we got to put in to make sure they're happy. So I think Montreat's is going to run smoothly. I don't expect them to renew the permit until January. So that's when your clock starts again for your 5 years. It's probably January. It might even be July, honestly. They've lost their program person. She's retired. Go back to that. Sorry. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see after we submit our draft. They have an interim director and they've got a big backlog. Weaverville and Woodfin are both in a waiting pattern. It's been months. So it could be next July before your permit's renewed, and you technically have to start doing the things, right? That's why the permit time is important. One thing that I think is really important for council to be aware of is that we do have to require annual inspections for the private stormwater control measures. They were required through David Curry's time. We have found them in your files, but they were no longer solicited or required after he left. That was and the state did not notice that. They didn't evaluate that, but that is the case. So I would like to try a voluntary approach like David did, which is send out a letter, it's time for your annual inspection. He sent them the right form that they need. Most of the time it was something they could do themselves. But there is the question, and I think that's where some pushback came, these underground vaults that are confined space. I think I'm going to clarify this, but I think technically need confined entry. You have to have a confined entry certification to go in them and to look at them. And so those may require someone, an external person to come and look at those. I do believe, and y'all could probably give me some history on this, that there had been some pushback on having to do that. And I'd like to clarify honestly what the actual requirements are for it. But I do want you to know that that is something that we will have to put back into place. It used to be done. It hasn't been done. I think one person has continued to send in a report, an inspection report. And Alex is like, yeah, we were never doing that. I'm like, oh, you were doing it. You were doing it. And here's the backlog. And then you stopped. And one person continued to submit his, but no one else did. And that's a state requirement. If you require stormwater control measure, it must be inspected annually. But it can be voluntary. It's not something that the town has to take on. I think it's only but your ordinance does say, if they do not do it, you have right of entry to do it for them. So that's where it's going to be a conversation. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to see what burden that places then on public works, if they're the ones who are having to follow up. My hope is that people are going to do it on their own. And I think we try it that way first. And then if we have to switch to a different approach, we switch to a different approach. But that's something we can also have another conversation about as a part of that's not, that level of detail doesn't have to be in the plan. That's really just before we send the letters out to the community. Like, I want to make sure council's aware that that is going to be happening, and that, some people are probably going to be confused because they haven't been requested to do this for a few years. So it's going to be, I think, important to craft the message carefully, right? And say, we know we haven't asked for this, but it is a requirement and we need to get back on track, somehow, some way to be diplomatic about it.
Mary, do you have any idea how many of these private SCMs we
I
have?
think it was about 18. It's not a crazy, and it's not a huge number, but I should know, I should have looked before I left at my spreadsheet. I do have a spreadsheet of them. Just by feeling it's under 20. It's under 20. And the number 18 comes to mind. So I think I must have counted at some point. So, it's not hundreds, certainly. I mean, you probably only have 300 plus households. So it's not hundreds. I think it's doable. What did we end up with the town? About less than 10? 6. Okay. The town has 6. Our town. they will need to be inspected.
Well, yeah, I think it was, but he wanted us to take it over because he didn't like having to pay for it to be inspected.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Right. And that's where I really want to clarify what exactly has to be done, and do you have to do a combined entry or not? Like I mean, I'm sure David put thought into it, but I just feel for my sake and for y'all's sake, I'd like for us to just have the facts in front of us.
good, thank you.
Yeah. But we will have to do that. It is a requirement of the permit. If you have SCMs that are required by permit, then they also have to be inspected annually. Yes, ma'am.
Question about that
Sure.
while you're on it. Who is required to have the underground collection?
So
I thought if
the
it was less than an acre or something like that.
So the choice to do an underground vault is really the homeowners, honestly. They have options so the trigger for requiring a stormwater control measure is 5,000 square feet of disturbance. That's a pretty minimal that you can have basically a rain garden and a swale that directs water away from the house and into a grassy area or something. At 10,000 square feet of disturbance, then you basically have to have a much more engineered approach. So typically you have to have sealed engineers drawings saying that you're managing a certain amount of stormwater volume on your property with that stormwater control measure. That's at 10,000 square feet of disturbance. So at 5,000 square feet of disturbance, there is a requirement, but it doesn't require a sealed, engineered, implementation. And that could be a vault or it could be a surface treatment. So, the decision to do a vault is a good question. Like what, I think maybe some developers went that route because it was easy for them, but over the long term for the homeowner, then maybe it's not in terms of maintenance. So that's a good question. In terms of recommendations, it's not in the ordinance. It recommends low impact development approaches, things that are in the stormwater design manual. It does not say put an underground vault in. That is a homeowner's choice. But when they make that choice, they have to be aware, if that's the case, that there's this inspection requirement and that's perhaps an ongoing cost they may want to reconsider. And that's a conversation, certainly that Kayla can also have with them at the time that they're submitting their development permits. So we will begin the stormwater implementation whenever the permit is renewed. I mean, your crews here is always working on your stormwater system, but technically we don't have to do anything until the permit starts, any new things. And I've added here, join the stormwater services program, because through that, and now you can go to the last slide. Through that, that's where I handle pretty much everything except this review process, which the code administrator would do, where they get the site plan and they say, does it meet, Montreat's ordinances on all of these different levels, hillside and setbacks and all the things. But through me and through our stormwater services program, I can provide all of the other pieces. The 6 minimum measures are on the left. They're not all 6 of them there because post construction and post construction are combined in one line. But there, it's really that I can assist with documentation, because you are as a Montreat is supposed to keep track of how many delegated tasks, Buncombe County, how many erosion sediment control things has Buncombe County processed, and really they only do it at an acre or above. So as far as I know right now, potentially only the lodge would even trigger Buncombe County's requirements, for example, because you basically have no sites here at an acre. Yeah. So that's the idea that we continue, that Kayla does, as a code administrator, she does the plan review. and make sure that kind of the paperwork's done correctly for each of the sites when they're developed. And that I, through Land to Sky, our regional services stormwater services program, handle kind of all of these other pieces in cooperation with Barry. Because he's really the man on the street doing the hard work, keeping the stormwater system clean and running. Yeah. And that's all I have.
Okay, are we on track for the 10-25-22? We're on track to get
Yes,
that.
sir.
And the other thing, when you talk about the register of deeds on the rain garden,
Yes.
do all rain gardens have to be?
Only the ones that are permitted. So the ones that are required by the town
Okay.
based on your ordinance. And
So if
yours, if
someone
they,
puts a private one on their piece of property, it doesn't have
if
to be.
just for fun, like because they like a rain garden, which I have one like that at home. I just have it because I like it. And it would not be required to go on the deed. It's
Okay.
only if it triggers your stormwater ordinance. So they have that amount of disturbance that triggers the requirement, then it has to be recorded on the deed.
Okay.
And that's common. I mean, that's not Montreat. That's common that you have it recorded on the deed. It just has not been done so over the past few years, including this one.
So
Okay.
in the case of that one, it was originally designed by the engineer as a retention pond.
Yes.
We turned it into the rain garden. Is there any?
No
difference?
difference. Either way, it was required because of the level of disturbance. You required some stormwater control. And that stormwater control, be it a detention pond or a retention pond or a beautiful rain garden, which is what it turned out to be, that any of those things would have to be recorded.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's just the amount of disturbance that triggers that. And I did actually reach out to because they didn't give you an O&M plan for it either. And I reached out to the architect and he put me in contact with the designer and so on and so forth. And I have still not been able to track down an O&M plan, an operation and maintenance plan. So that's something, yeah, that we still need to do, which is basically how does Barry maintain it?
Does anyone else have a question of Mary or comment? I'm impressed with Kayla so far.
Good.
She's really sharp young lady.
I think so too.
Everyone I've talked to that's worked with her are very complimentary of her and her preciseness and follow-up and so forth.
And she does have some suggestions for the stormwater ordinance. They're all about precision, though. It's not changing it. It's just making it very crystal clear, exactly, without a doubt, what is being stated
And
there.
we
So
will-
I appreciate
We will
that.
certainly listen to her.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, Mary? Thank you, Mary. And unless you want to sit and watch this sausage being made, you'd be excused. We'll drive carefully. Yes, ma'am. Next item on the agenda is consideration of appointing William Bill Tucker to the Planning and Zoning Commission to fill an alternate position which will expire on 9/30/2025. Do I have a motion? Have a motion. Do I have a second? Have a second from Commissioner Fouché. Any discussion or questions or comments? Consider an appointment of William Bill Tucker to the Planning and Zoning Commission to fill an alternate position which will expire on 9/30/2025. No? Go up to B. That's all right. Okay. My wife would never say you got it right. Thank you, though. I'll take that as a win. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed. Item C is consider an appointment of Mark Spence to the Board of Adjustment to fill an alternate position which will expire on 9/30/2025. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
I have a motion from Commissioner Fouché. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Alexander. Discussion? Comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes carry. Kitty, did you vote?
I did.
Okay, I didn't hear you. Item D, consideration of appointment for Maury Grambling to the Board of Adjustment to fill an unexpired regular position, which will expire on 9/30/2025. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, we'd like to table this motion. We were hoping that Mari would be here because we had a couple questions for her. So could we table this until next meeting and we have a chance to talk to her?
Okay, if you'll make a motion to that effect.
I move that we table this motion to appoint Mari Gramling to the Board of Adjustment as a regular member until to the October meeting.
I have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Whitmer to table the motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
Have a second from Commissioner Alexander. Questions and or discussion? All those in favor of the motion to table the motion signify by saying aye. Public comment. The floor is open for any public comment. Nobody jumped up, so we'll move on. Commissioners' communications. Does anybody have any?
I'll just say that the Heritage Center is putting on this conference about the Inklings and Shakespeare. It's fabulous. It's been a fabulous conference. So kudos to them. And thanks to MRA for hosting it,
Thank you, Kitty.
providing space.
Anyone else? Comments? Commissioners?
I'll just say that I've talked to probably 4 or 5 different people that have been involved in some of the home meetings as part of the comprehensive plan that is being developed. And without absolutely unanimously, they've said that those meetings have been very valuable to them.
Thanks, Tom. Dates to remember. The Board of Adjustment meeting on Thursday will not happen. Thursday, the 22nd of September. It's been postponed to another date. Tree Board will meet Tuesday, September the 27th at 9:30 a.m. here in Town Hall. Land Care is on Wednesday, October the 5th at 9 a.m. in Town Hall. Planning and Zoning, Thursday, October the 13th, 10:30 at Town Hall. October Town Council meeting, Thursday, October the 13th at 7 p.m. in Town Hall. Public forum will begin at 6:30. The Tree Board, Tree Board again. Y'all are meeting a lot. Tuesday, October the 25th at 9:30 a.m. in Town Hall. And the tentative Board of Adjustment is Thursday, October the 27th at 5 p.m. Does that take care of the October 5 meeting, or is that another one? Okay, October 5 at 5 p.m., the Board of Adjustment has a special meeting here at Town Hall. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have a quick question first,
Sure.
if I can.
Sure.
We certainly appreciate the work that Mark Spence has done for the last 5 or 6 years, not only serving first on the Board of Adjustment, but then chairing it. With him moving into the alternate role, will they, as a group, be electing a new chair at their next meeting, or how does that work?
I think that is on their agenda. If I remember correctly, talking with Kayla, our zoning administrator, that those offices are being considered. Or will be considered.
Thanks, Ben, for answering that question. Anyone else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion from Commissioner, Mayor Pro Tem Whitmer. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Fouché. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to adjourn signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes carry. We stand adjourned.